Welcome to the Humans and Earth podcast. We bring you inspiration and practical resources for healing our planet and ourselves. It is time for soulful contributions that regenerate life on Earth.
I'm Helen Claire Harmon, a thought leader and teacher who believes we're ready to renew Earth and heal ourselves in the process. Welcome to today's episode. Welcome back to Humans and Earth. I am really happy today to be talking with Ray Anthony James. He is an organic chemist, a nutritional supplement product developer, a researcher and educator, a biostimulant formulator from natural plant sources, and an author and speaker with over 28 years in the pharmaceutical industry and at the FDA. He has over 30 patents and peer-reviewed scientific publications combined. He is also the author of the children's nutrition book, Veggie Rhapsody, I Want You in My Lunch, published in 2013, which sounds really great to me. In his past life as a lead investigator at Pharmacopeia Incorporated, Ligand Pharmaceuticals, and principal scientist at Intrexon Corporation from 1998 until 2015, he was involved in designing drugs for cancer and inflammation and presented his many discoveries at national scientific meetings. From 2015 to 2017, he was a fellow at the US government's premier oversight organization, the Food and Drug Administration, where he reviewed and approved or disapproved of all facets of new and existing drug applications. He quit all the farce in 2016 to pursue his lifelong dream of being on Earth and serving the soil and humanity in ways yet to be conceived. Today, Ray is a partner and founder of the Moringa Group, Gleeful Monkey, Omega Limited, Soil Biotica, and Kissing Tadpoles Publishing Company. He lives with his wife, a vice president and computer systems specialist and nutritional expert, and with his 3 children, and because that is clearly not enough chaos, 2 cats. Prior to becoming a proud and obsessed dad, Ray also has enjoyed farming, smiling, talking, playing and watching soccer, off-road bicycling, hiking, camping, saltwater fishing, climbing to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, traveling, nutrition, reading, and enjoying really good food. And we know for a fact that Ray is doing something right because he reports in his bio that he has never had a cavity. So he clearly is on the successful health path. I am really excited about what you're doing, Ray, because I've interviewed quite a few people actually who, like you and like me, have spent time building conventional careers and then have stepped into a direction that can be labeled in all kinds of ways. More holistic, more focused on sustainability. For some of us, it's more spiritual, it's more authentic, it might contain more integrity, maybe more adventure, maybe more challenge. So I'd love to hear how you conceptualize that. But I am not only very intrigued by what you're doing with Moringa, and I absolutely want to hear about Soil Biotica because I'm very devoted to soil actually and gardening. But I'm just curious maybe for you to start by talking about your pathway and this big transition that you've made in the last few years from quite a conventional scientific career to something broader.
Okay. Yes, I'm Ray, and basically my story started in the countryside of Jamaica, small rural farming community, no running water, no toilets that we used to flush like we do here, and we cook with wooden fires. The animals that we had on the farm were so precious that we would just use them for the milk or the feathers, and when we had to basically process one of them, it was at the time when they were pretty old and everything would be eaten. So As a child, I roamed freely, did not know that I was poor. I roamed, it was a very carefree kind of life, and not the responsibilities were just to sweep the yard and feed the animals and basically go to school. Um, at some point, you get a small plot of land because we did live off the land and grew most of our food. We hardly had enough money to buy flour or rice. So everything came from the garden farm. And what was left over was actually sold into the markets. We had a family of about six. My grandmother and my grandfather were my caretakers. My mom had to go to the city to work. And as the product of a single mom and a family that didn't have much, I calculated probably about 6 months ago that we lived on about $25 to $50 per year, US dollars. And we lived. So the holidays were pretty extravagant. We ate all the foods that we didn't eat during the year. At school, we were given like bulgur and like all the things that people wouldn't eat, basically, what are called health foods right now. So at that time, I started to formulate an idea and to manifest actually coming to the United States. I was not allowed to miss school, and thus it was something that was ingrained in me. By the time I was a teenager, I basically somehow, I'm not even know what that inspiration was. I started thinking about, oh, I haven't gone to the doctor for any illnesses by this time. And I started thinking of the plants that they would give us when we were feeling not so good inside, and started thinking, man, if I could just figure out how to get these things into the professional atmosphere so that people's lives could be better, that would be awesome. So that's how I got interested in science. So I started reading all kinds of books and making batteries and electricity and doing galvanization and how cells work. And it was just like something that was really, really special to me. And that was my purpose, was to get to the United States, go to university, become that scientist that would decipher all this matter. And then once I decipher the mechanisms of how they work, then I could go back to Jamaica and basically decipher how those things, bring them to market, help the community. I lost that path. I went into the pharmaceutical industry because that was the natural progression of things coming out of grad school, and just family and responsibility, and you seeing all the cash, and you just get into that mode. And I met a wonderful woman, and she got into nutrition, and she started saying, hey, you got to stop the white rice. No, what are you talking about? I've been eating it. People have been eating it all their lives. They don't die. And so I got into that. I started reading more about nutrition. And as a consequence of that, I got into more of the herbal foods, the brown rice, the grains that are actually good for our bodies. And it was just one of those things that have brought me here. So fast forward, I've been in the pharmaceutical industry. I've been successful at it, and I was at the FDA. I went to the FDA with the sole purpose, basically, of augmenting what I was doing. I was a researcher for the longest time, and I thought I could be of great help in weeding out those drugs and those entities that are poisonous to people, not realizing that everything that I'd made was actually something that the universe had never seen. That's why they're patentable. And we were giving these to people, and that they were actually causing more deaths than any single other disease out there. So I saw how they were operating, and within a 6-week period of time, I got very ill. I lost all motivation, and my wife saw what was happening to me, because usually I'm a happy, smiling person, and I was just down in the dumps. And we agreed that I had to quit. Simultaneously, I started to think back to my youth when we were using Moringa. Moringa was one of the staples that we used. Said, oh man, I need to start using Moringa. And I did not know like the benefits of Moringa. But once I started thinking of just reinitiating the use of Moringa, all of this world just opened. And I started seeing literature and videos and all these things that just was flashing in front of my eyes. So I started reading and just getting all that research and just deciphering it and getting it in my brain. And my friend called me and said that he had diabetes and he did not know. So I said, hey, why don't you go back and start using Moringa? I have some. So he went back and I sent him some of what I had. And basically the company was born out of that, because by the time he started to use it on that Tuesday, by Friday, his blood sugar levels had decreased from like 325 to under 150.
Oh,
and he said, we should start a company. And at that time, I had just quit. And I'm like, yes, I'm moving to Florida. So we sold our house. 8 weeks later, we were in Florida. And that's when we started the Moringa Group.
And of course, your research and pharmaceutical background positioned you perfectly to really understand the depth of a plant like Moringa.
Yes. And so when you're talking about Moringa and the benefits that it brings to the planet and to people, it's one of the most densely nutritious foods, terrestrial foods on the planet, basically. And when you add that to your lifestyle every day, which I do every day, I know when I miss it. It's kind of like people that drink coffee all the time. I know when I don't have it, because certain things, oh, I did not have my Moringa. I'm getting that fog in the afternoon. My skin looks kind of pale, stuff like that,
So let's tell people what it is. I'm actually drinking Moringa tea this morning. I've known about it for a while. I think I follow nutrition a lot, like you. Excellent. I have for decades. And I think it's so interesting how nutrition is very often a pathway for people into all kinds of other important realms. But I think the way that I first heard of Moringa was through the permaculture community.
Sure.
Because where I live here in the Northeast, I don't think we can grow it. But I know US permaculturalists in places like Florida and Arizona are growing it really successfully.
Yes.
So it's a tree. It's native to equatorial areas. Tell us a little bit more of the basics about it.
So Moringa is a tree. It can grow up to 60 feet in some of the species. There are 13 different species, non-GMO species, because now they're trying to change the taste and change, how it grows and how much fodder it gets on, and all these things that humans try to do when they encounter something as beautiful as the Moringa tree. It grows. It's a native of India. It was first found around the Himalayas, the base of the Himalayas. And from there, it expanded into the New World. It's now all over Africa. They use it in Africa to just bridge the gap in the nutrition. We used to see a lot of people, the babies with malnutrition. Well, now the breastfeeding moms use that Moringa to increase their breast milk production and increase the outlook of the development of their children. In South America, It's all over South America, in the Caribbean. That's where we are with our farm at this point. We're just starting to set up our grow. Basically, when you use Moringa, it is shown to basically improve your immune system tremendously, improve your gastrointestinal, improve your skin, your hair growth. It calms the stresses down in your body. There are 300 different indications that traditional medicine have used it for. It's basically called the miracle tree because if you have something, they would use Moringa for it. You know, if we had a stomach ache, it would be Moringa. If you have a bacterial infection, it would be Moringa. And in the scientific literature, they've talked about diabetes. They've studied cholesterol. They've studied fatty livers, all of these things. Some of the kidney disease, for instance. There's an experiment that they did, and this was just one experiment, so you can't really say it's a proof of anything, but they gave rats acetaminophen, which is Tylenol, until it's a liver killer.
Yeah.
So they gave the rats high amounts of acetaminophen until their livers were basically done, and they divided them into groups and took all the supplements from different companies, iron supplements from different companies, to see if they could reconstitute the liver. And in one group, they used Moringa. All the other groups died. The one that lived, when they do a histology and opened them up and looked at their livers, there were no scarring, nothing. Their livers were back to normal. So that the high antioxidants and the multitude of different vitamins, I think there's 46 antioxidants in Moringa. There are 92 different constituents, all of which are not totally deciphered, but they know that some of which are very, very good for just aiding the body and regenerating cells. And that's what we need to do as we grow. We're losing billions of cells every day, and Moringa helps to get those healthy cells moving and regenerating. So
wow. And I mean, the liver regeneration alone is amazing, because we have had situations for humanity for a long time where there are things that really damage our livers, whether it's parasites or viruses or pharmaceuticals, over the counter or prescription, or
the air.
The high levels of environmental toxicity. So a plant that can support the liver is a big deal.
Yes. And because the liver has to deal with so many adverse chemicals, everything we do, everything we encounter, everything we put into our bodies must go through the liver. And at the point where it's going through the liver, it has to be broken down. If it's toxic, whether it's toxic or whether it's really, really awesome, the liver enzymes decide what they need to do with that. And the liver cells need protection. And these antioxidants that we actually ingest from many plant sources, a diversity of plant sources, I'm not just saying Moringa is the key. We should be doing it from all different plant sources.
Yes.
And these antioxidants are going to protect those liver cells from dying also, because the liver will kill its own cells, and then you get into that liver disease that we're talking about. So yes.
Wow, so exciting. And what's going on with organic or regenerative Moringa cultivation? I don't know if you've come across the Rodale Institute's new regenerative certification, but I have a little bit of connection with them, and they're not far from where I live. I'm actually really excited that they, as an organization with such a global voice, are helping us realize organic was a step, but regenerative is where it's at.
Way down here.
Yeah. So the whole regenerative agriculture is extremely exciting. what's going on with Moringa cultivation? Is a lot of it organic? Is a lot of it not? Is anyone doing regenerative? What do you know
So
about
in
that?
the regenerative culture or applications as it pertains to Moringa has been happening in small circles. So you have some people, for instance, in Africa that are doing that regenerative agriculture, mass production of Moringa. For us, for example, we have now attained 152 acres wherein we're planting the Moringa plant. We are not destroying the big trees, small trees, shrubs, indigenous plants, but we're intercropping into those areas. And we're testing the soil biology to make sure that the succession of these plants that we're planting, that the correct biology and the correct biomass of fungi and all the soil food web is there to support these plants so we don't have to weed. But we also put like sweet potatoes underneath the canopy, or alfalfa, different cover crops to cover that land so that it can regenerate and feed the soil food web in order to maintain. So you will not see us using nitrogen fertilizers. We're going to be composting. This here, I don't know if you can see it.
Yes.
This is a small branch from the Moringa plant.
Ah.
Okay. And this here is food.
Mm-hmm.
So you can saute it
right
while it's green. You can chop it up and add it back to the soil as mulch. And all the constituents that are in this will help to feed the soil food web.
Yeah.
There's ample amount of nitrogen, ample amount of micronutrients, macronutrients, vitamins, antioxidants, everything that we need, almost everything that we need. Because you don't have a whole lot of B vitamins in there. But,
okay. Does it contain protein as well?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I thought that's what I had read.
So the best way to figure out if your plant leaf has protein is to get the green leaf. Just put it in a bag at room temperature. And tomorrow morning, open it up and just feel it with the back of your hand to see if it had gotten warm. With Moringa leaves, this will be at about 110 degrees when you put it in a bag. That's how much nitrogen is contained in the leaves.
Really?
Yes. So this could be a good source for any compost pile as your nitrogen source, plus all the other benefits. So this is harvested by hand. And we employ the local community. So we have what's called the inner community that lives on a farm. And in Jamaica, what happens is that in the rural areas, people cannot generate enough income to maintain their families, to even build quality homes. So some of those people will be living on the farm. We'll teach them how to do sustainable agriculture, how to use the parts of the plant that we don't use in manufacturing or in any of the agro parts of the business, how to put those back in the soil and recycle. Or they can just eat it, or they can feed it to the chickens, they can feed it to the animals, because that's all a part of the regenerative agriculture. The permaculture is that you have animals foraging on the things that you're growing, and the beneficial insects are coming, and we have a community, and us as the stewards of the land. We were given that duty as the stewards. So we're being the stewards, and we're making sure things are working in the way that it was intended to work. And once all of that is, so they go around and they pick those green leaves, and we have these guys that are living on the land in different houses and their families, and they're making an income. And that income, some of them grow like corn or maize, which is pretty high intensive pesticides, high intensive NPK, which just poisons all the beneficial insects. It poisons the food web, and none of that actually works until the food web is dead anyways. So we're teaching them to go back to the place where they're working with nature instead of working against nature, and then nature punishes their crops by putting in pests that they have to use sprays to spray. So we want the ladybugs and the crickets and the praying mantises, and we leave some of the crop for caterpillars. And by the way, Moringa does not need any pesticides to grow.
Yeah.
Okay. It will grow in a plethora of areas. They've actually transformed parts of deserts with Moringa, where you can see them from space in Northern Africa. So you don't need a lot of water. We actually install drip lines in places where you don't get those 2 rainfalls a year, so that you can get the 3 to 5 harvests of the plant. So basically now, 3 to 5. So in the community's regular practice to grow maize or corn, they would get 1 crop per year. And if there's a drought, their whole crop is wiped out. Or if there's pesticide, if there are pests, then lots of pesticides, or the crops gets destroyed, or half of it gets destroyed. They don't get very good money for it. But with Moringa, 3 to 5 on a kilo to kilo basis, maize or corn versus Moringa, it's about 18 times more that they can make from growing Moringa. And that's just for the people on the farm. What we're trying to do is we'll be going outside the farm to co-ops, and those guys will be making even more cash on a kilo per kilo basis. And
processing.
Yes, and there'll be the people that are working with their hands on the farm to maintain the plants. There'll be people hauling it back to the processing facility. There'll be people that will be, their lives are just going to be improved. So in terms of regeneration, it starts at the soil level and it goes through the Moringa plant and to the stewards of the land. So that's this kind of setup that we are currently growing. So as far as the farm itself, we've included the native plants, fruit trees. We're not taking anything out. There's sugar cane, there are herbs growing underneath, sweet potatoes, okras, beans, all of these things that are intercropped with the Moringa. And then the Moringa plant becomes a nursery. So the bigger plants become the shade for the seedlings that we're growing. So we don't have to set up any canopy in order to do that. As soon as we'll talk about the processing in a minute, because we have like some maybe innovative ways that needs to be practiced and put into practice to get to use less energy, more from the sun and not from the electric grid, because when you go to the third world, the electric grid is not very, very reliable. Right. So we'll talk about that later. So that's what we're doing right now in terms of regeneration.
That is inspiring. It's really inspiring. I truly believe that this needs to be the future and that we are developing this as the future of work, nutrition, business. The model that you describe is wonderful for people, yes, both the consumers and the workers. It's wonderful for the planet. It's one of those win-win-win approaches. And I'm totally in admiration, really excited. And
one more, I guess it's 5 more things, but this Moringa plant, right? Not only can you do things with the leaves, that's nutrition. You can use it for fertilizer, but the stem of the Moringa plant, which I cut off a piece of one of mine down in Florida here. Okay. This is the stem.
Yeah.
And you can see that green part growing off. So we would, when this gets bigger, we would pluck that part off, which is green. The yellow leaves are not used.
Okay.
We try to limit the yellow leaves to maybe less than 1% of what we would actually have in our green fodder, so that we can maximize the nutritional value of the leaves and the plants that we're having. So you have the stem, which is pretty fibrous.
Mm-hmm.
The bark also has medicinal properties. So it's easily stripped. This bark you have to use in less amounts. People use it, we don't. We don't use the bark. But in other countries where they know more about how to apply the bark in medicines, there are lots of different medicines for a lot of different diseases that comes from the bark. When you strip the bark, there's that fibrous material, and hemp. They use hemp for clothes and all this.
Yeah.
This is very fibrous. It's a very soft wood. It's very fibrous, and that can be used in polymerizations to make things that are biodegradable. As you go down to the roots of the plant, it's even more medicines, and you have to know what you're doing when you're using those, because there's certain alkaloids that can actually kill you. But these leaves, the flowers, the seed pods, the seeds are all edible.
The seeds as well.
The seeds. Actually, if you get a moringa seed and you pluck it out of its pod, they're like 17 to like 20 something of them, depending on the species. And you take one of those and you open it up, and there's a little moringa seed in there. You just pop it in your mouth. There's more vitamin C in that one seed than a whole orange. It's so intensely sour that it'll make your mouth kind of like do the sour taste, But in the mode of just chewing, if you get a little bit of water and put it in your mouth while you're chewing, everything becomes sweet.
This is a truly fascinating plant. I mean, I'm a real plant person. I've been devoted to plants since I was a toddler, but I am hearing what you're saying. Moringa is truly amazing.
Yes, it's the miracle tree, and it grows. You're saying that you can't grow it in Pennsylvania, but if you get a 5-gallon bucket, get some good soil and some good compost, top it off with some leaf dressing,
right,
and a little bit of sand, about 5% sand in that earth, and you plant your moringa seed in there. Usually I plant 2, just so if one doesn't make it. And if both of them make it, I clip one, the lesser of the 2.
That's always hard for me to do.
I know it's hard for me to do, but I eat it. I eat the stem, and that makes it more palatable.
Yeah.
Or you can just get another 5-gallon drum bucket and plant it. And if you do that, you can actually, from the springtime to the fall time, you could have, so it's about a foot per week under ideal conditions when it's
I have to do it
in a sunny area. I can send you some seeds. You can go for it.
Oh, please do. I will plant them right away. And then I would need to bring it inside for the winter.
Yeah, you cut it to about waist height, which is how we cut it on the farm, to about, because people are different heights, we tell them cut it between your waist and the top of your belly, from your belly button all the way to underneath your rib cage. So you have that. So you chop it like that. You cover it up with some plastic or bag and bring it inside.
Yeah.
And as long as it doesn't freeze, it will grow. As soon as the temperature comes around, boom, it just grows from everywhere.
I absolutely want to do it. So if you have seeds, please send me some.
Will do.
I would really love to do it.
In terms of even more applications, so you can use these leaves to create biogas. It's a very efficient biogas maker. You can collect, once the leaves are fermented, you can make like methane to cook with. You can make, it's a very, you can also make ethanol from it. So this plant can be used in a multitude of ways.
It's quite amazing.
Yeah, and this work is ongoing right now. We're more into nutrition and agriculture is like our two focus, and getting true organic moringa into the market that people can take every day without thinking that that it is polluted with, heavy metals from India or, other places where, the environment is pretty toxic. And you have to be careful about that, because if you plant it in soils where heavy metals are there, it's going to pick up the heavy metals. So
Right.
That's part of what we're doing right now. And part of our efforts in Soil Biotica, in the Moringa Group, is to help the community to stop using these toxic organic pesticides and the NPKs, and just use what nature does in the forests.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're demonstrating that with your forest agriculture, your multi-story. So what is your Soil Biotica endeavor?
My Soil Biotica came out of, actually, while I was doing the plans for the farm for Moringa in terms of sustainability, and I don't like sustainability that much. It just seems you're sustaining something.
I know.
And the definitions that they give is like, you're taking a little and you're saving some for the next generation, but you're still taking. It doesn't say anything about giving, what you're giving. It says only that you're taking and you're leaving.
I am done with sustainability. I mean, I'll still use the word because people recognize it and you can open a conversation that way. But as far as I'm concerned, it's totally passé.
Yes.
It was a stage, but it's so 20th century, in my view. And we are ready for approaches and terms with incredibly more depth and reciprocity.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it too. So maybe, some brainstorming can happen, and, I haven't come up with like the ones that I like. So I just say, I do not like that sustainability.
Yeah.
So anyways, so what we're going to be doing with, I lost my chain of thought actually.
Oh, I asked you about Soil Biotica.
Okay, so Soil Biotica. Yes, Soil Biotica. So that came out of me just planning the farm for Moringa, and how we should grow it and how it should be sustainable and regenerative, and it should help the local community. And I was thinking, I do not want to use these NPKs. One of my partners says, these are the tonnage of NPK that we're going to be using. And I said, no, I'm out if that's what we're going to be doing, is to just kill everything in the soil and go to a soil that's going to erode and just wash away after we, this cannot be sustained. Yeah. And so.
And for people who aren't in agriculture, NPK is the nitrogen,
potassium.
Yeah. Yeah. The standard and phosphorus, right?
Yeah, the synthetic fertilizer.
Synthetic fertilizers that are typically produced from natural gas today. Is that correct?
And petroleum products and stuff like that.
So obviously these are constituents in nature, but when we use them in agriculture, they're synthetically produced, and we overuse them and they're really damaging.
For instance, right down here in Florida, there's a company called Mosaic. All they do is extract, they might dig these big holes in the earth. The rocks are completely taken out. Everything is destroyed in the communities. The communities get completely polluted, and they take out the rock and they get 5% phosphorus from this rock. And then they have nowhere to do the byproducts. So by the time they take out what they need to put into that the phosphorus into the fertilizer, they basically dig these huge holes in the earth that are retainer ponds. They line them and they dump now this concentrated goo of chemicals and radioactive phosphorus, because now it's concentrated, because now you're getting that P31, the kind of stuff they use for imaging when you go to x-rays and stuff like that. They use that in order to, they put that in the ponds, and once a year, 2, 3, whoever, they have a hole in them and they end up in the ocean. And nothing is done about it. And we live maybe 40 miles, and I'm sure our water table is, we have all kinds of filters in our houses. Yeah. So this is what like the industrial fertilization companies do. They just pollute and they leave communities in total shambles. Yeah. And they get cancers and all kinds of things. So anyway.
Yeah, and people have bought the story that that's how it has to be, that sure. That's how, well, in order for us to survive and produce food, we have to do a certain amount of damage. It's totally sick. And
that's not true.
No, right, not true.
In fact, the studies that have been done on, what we call organic agriculture and their production versus conventional agriculture with the NPK and the GMOs, our food production has not increased.
I know. And I'll just mention, in case you haven't read it, and for our listeners, a book that is phenomenal on this topic is Steve Bresch's Fertile Ground. Brescia is one of the directors at the Groundswell Institute, and they are a leading organization in agroecological research and implementation, especially in the developing world. So if anyone listening to our conversation is unsure about Ray's claim that the GMO and conventional and chemical-based green revolution approaches have not really worked, I mean, there are 1,000 things you can read that are proving that, but the Rodale Institute is a really good place to look to, and Groundswell International, Bresch's book, Fertile Ground, truly eye-opening, because we already have a renewable, regenerative, sustainable, organic set of approaches that can feed the planet without damaging our bodies and the soil and the insects and the birds and the air and the water. It's incredibly important information.
Yeah, and people don't realize that insect out there that's eating, we're part of that whole system and the cycle. We die, we give back into that the nutrient cycle of things, and we help the plants to grow. And people don't understand that. If they don't realize that we are a part of that system and we're not separate from that system, then we're doomed to fail. I just read that the population is supposed to get to 9 billion by 2060 or something. And at that point, we won't be able to feed everyone on the planet unless we're eating cardboard or plastic.
Well, I mean, with regenerative agriculture and plants like Moringa, we probably can. But with 20th century conventional agriculture, we've never succeeded in feeding everybody, and we won't.
Ever. We've never done it. And, just doing this for profit doesn't help us one bit. So back to Soil Biotica. So it's a brainchild out of just setting up that farm and trying to get to regenerative agriculture. I listened to a talk by this lady named Elaine Ingham, and she's a big proponent of the Soil Food Web. And in just reading more and more about the work that she's done, the pioneering work that she's done around microbes in the soil, when people were saying, oh, those were not important. she was advocating for that. And she was basically ran out of the university for saying that like some of the things that big ag were doing were actually detrimental. And so they ran her out of there, and she started her soil food web school, just like you're doing with your school. And I really appreciate that. I'm most likely going to take some of your classes. So
Wonderful.
Let me just say that.
You are very welcome to, and I will have to look up what she's doing with the soil food web. So, yeah, it's so important right now for people to know that we have healing and regenerative alternatives.
Yes.
And they're already in place. I mean,
they're there.
That's what I love about what you're doing. You're not trying to develop something that's going to maybe work in 20 or 30 years.
No.
Moringa already works.
It works already.
Regenerative agriculture already has been proven, not only by millennia of indigenous people all over the planet, but also by the last few decades of scientific research. So the solutions are here. Yes. We just need to keep implementing.
Yeah. And so for soil biotica, I use my microscope a lot. I use my soil compaction sample taker a lot to make, because within the scope of our agricultural land with conventional agriculture, the compaction layer of our soil is at about, like in most soils, about 12 inches. It's the depth of the plow. At the depth of the plow is where your compaction layer is made. And then the roots cannot sink below that. And you get anaerobic bacteria, which eats at the roots. You get root rotting. You get plants that are struggling to live, so they have to feed them NPK. And when I realized that fungi in the soil is what kept the soil from washing away and not just the roots of the plants, I was like, oh my God, I cannot go any further. I have to make not even a U-turn. I made a right angle turn, 90 degrees. And I said, I need to study this. So that's what I've done. I've studied the soil food web, and I'm applying it. I've applied it to my lawn, my backyard garden. I compost, and I compost in the right way, because you want to have a certain population or biomass of your fungi and your bacteria and your flagellates and your ciliates and all these different soil microbes that work together and feed each other and, like just make everything just grow. Because I did not realize that. I thought it was just NPK plus a few more.
And what we're realizing is you're realizing our lives are dependent on them. I mean, it's so humbling. I really could cry thinking and talking about it, that yes, we're advanced organisms. The human species can do a lot, but our existence is literally dependent on soil microbes. It's so humbling and beautiful. And it's such a lesson in how life on this planet actually works.
Yes, it's so like amazing, it makes me like, I want to tear up. Like when I figured out that the plant determines what nutrient it wants, not what you give it, but it tells those microbes, if they're present, that they are, I need calcium, and it will feed the microbes down there and attract them to its root system and give them the food that they desire in order to make the calcium that it needs. I could not believe that.
It's a whole conversation going on below the soil.
Yeah. And I could not go back to applying anything to my plants. I could not go back to like NPK and, in fact, I used to use the organic fertilizers, but I don't even do that anymore because the plants themselves, they know what they want, and I just have to be the steward of the
and even
the earth. That's
even something as simple as leaf mulch, maybe made of moringa. That's we can apply that. That's all you need. And it can be free.
It is free.
Right.
I raked my neighbor's sidewalk and the leaf.
Right.
I spread it all through my garden.
Yeah,
Man,
because other people think it's trash. They
I
don't
know they had
realize
them in
it's
bed,
totally precious.
I know it is such a precious commodity. Once aged, they are like they're just giving back and supplying the carbon and like the nitrogen and the food, and they harbor the fungi and they harbor the web of the soil. As long as there's oxygen going into those areas, you have nothing to worry about. Oxygen is the key when you're doing your compost, when your soil is aerated. I do not plow anymore, but I keep enough organic matter and enough of the soil food web going. And that's what Soil Biotica does. We make sure that we're tuning into our plants, watching them, and we're watching what we have in our soil. If I see something happening on the plant, and pests are coming, then I know there's something wrong down in the soil. So it needs maybe some compost tea or some vermicompost tea or something. And those microbes will do a great balance of those pests. Yeah. And a plant in stress, just like a human in stress, calls out, and they're vibrating in a certain way that attracts the diseases and the pests.
Yes.
In fact, they send out a hormone that the insects can smell. They're like, hey, you're in trouble? We're coming. We'll help you to get rid of you. So, so that's Soil Biotica.
Oh, so exciting. Ray, I'm going to have you back on the podcast in the next year because I feel like I could talk to you literally all day. I think what I want to ask you as we move, we don't have to close our conversation immediately, but as we move toward a close, how do you feel now that you've changed your work? You spent a lot of time in a very conventional environment. I'm trying to think of the right way to say this, that was not holistically oriented and not attuned to these natural cycles. Yes. How do you feel as a human being doing the work you're doing now?
It's like I describe it as the Titan, the picture of the Titan with the world on his back, and he's going up and he's just holding it, and you can see the pain in his face. I feel like that picture, if you just put my picture there with that world and the conventional thinking and all the problems that I was thinking I had, I took that iron ball off my back, and now it's like right here, and I'm the one it's light, and I'm just looking at it from a different perspective. Now it's not something that's weighing me. It's something that's enlightening, and I want to do something about it. Yeah. I get to do that. And it's just, my spirit has changed. My breathing has changed. My life has changed. I feel like I'm getting younger. Yeah. I am actually, things that were fearful to me, I'm actually approaching those things and just getting rid of them. And I'm becoming this new wholesome person that is giving of love and be able to accept it. It's like my hands are out and I'm just, without the ball this time, but I'm just like, hey, let's live like this, let's just, and I also, with all that perspective, I also realized that we have a duty to say the words and to tell others, even if they're not ready to hear, and that until a big enough group of us that are spiritually inclined are vibrating in that one, we will have a hard time changing the bigger picture of, we can do whatever we want to this place and it'll be here forever. So I'm just a happier person.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. As you were saying that, I was thinking about the spiritual conversation around sovereignty, where instead of feeling like you're enslaved by the system, recognize that you are actually the actor, you are the creator. And there's this whole conversation going on about New Earth and 5D consciousness. And I feel like you described it, because it's the peace, it's the integrity, the alignment, the love, the spirit of inquiry, and the knowing, which I'm just in love with your company and everything you're doing, the knowing that we get to choose. We get to create.
Of course.
We want to live in chemical soup and have all these mental and physical health problems and inner discontinuities and destroying our planet. Or we can choose to live in these beautiful, life-enhancing, nurturing, regenerative ways. And you're doing it. You're modeling that personal transition and the public contribution through your businesses. I'm in awe, totally feeling a ton of respect for what you're doing.
I'm in awe of you and your beautiful, welcoming site. I showed my wife and she was like, oh my God, I just love this. She was, she was like emotional. She was like, I love it. I showed her
the ebook,
the ebook. I read it. I made notes.
Oh, wonderful.
I mean, it's just awesome. It's inspiring what you're doing. We have some conscious people around that are very much in the same thought processes that we're in, and that they're transforming things out there in their own way. A lot of people just don't know where to start or where to go from where they are. And I'm probably one of them. I'm doing things, but there's much that I don't know.
Well, it's true for all of us. And that's really my core purpose in this podcast, is to help people connect to one another and to help people feel that hope and inspiration as they see the kind of work that you and others are doing. Our solutions already exist. We don't have to be in despair. We just need to continue connecting with one another and stepping forward in co-creation.
Amen. And stop the fear. No, don't do it. Don't do it. The things that we fear most comes up and bites us in the butt. They never go away. They just follow us around, and you manifest them and they just bite you. You can never live like that. And I'm not in everyone else's shoes and knowing what they're going through, but I've been in dark places, and I've been in those situations where, it might not have come out the way it did like this, but when you overcome that, you're free to just live.
Yes.
So.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ray Anthony James. You can find him online at the Moringa Group. And Ray, it's just been a total delight to be in conversation with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I respect everything you're doing, and you'll have.
Thank you for listening to Humans and Earth. Please share this episode to broaden engagement in the regeneration our world needs. You'll find social media links in the show notes. To explore our other offerings, visit www.humansandearth.com.